Welcome, everyone, to the Girlfriend Book Club's monthly discussion. I'm Shelley Emling, the editor of the Girlfriend newsletter. I'm also the moderator of the Girlfriend Book Club. And for July, the 83,000 or so of you chose Just for the Summer as our pick. And as always, I am so glad you did. You always choose the best books. And I read this in about 2 days. I could not put it down. So we're so thrilled to welcome the author of the book, Abby Jimenez. So welcome, Abby.
Hi.
So glad to have you with us. So Abby, I know you've written 5 other romance novels. This is your 6th, I believe, correct?
Yes.
But I heard that this book, Just for the Summer, was a New York Times bestseller. It went to like the top right out of the gate. So were you surprised at how quickly this book took off?
Yes. I've had some other New York Times bestsellers. This was my first #1 New York Times bestseller, and I did not expect it to hit #1. So that was truly, I I was so I actually made a video that went viral of me getting the news, and I couldn't even believe it. And it's continuing to stay on the list. It's actually been on the list 7 weeks now as of this interview, and it was #2 this week on the list for the paperback. So it's phenomenal. I'm just so excited people are loving it as much as they are.
So I have to ask you, not you've probably been asked this a million times, but was it harder to write from Justin's point of view or Emma's point of view, or was it the same?
Sometimes it depends on the book. It can be harder to write from one person's POV versus the other, but this was actually pretty equal for me. But in general, this was sort of a difficult book for me to write in general, just because of the subject matter. One thing that I realized in this book coming out into the universe, I didn't think this book was going to be as relatable as it was. I actually thought to myself, this is going to be my least relatable book, because how many people have, a mom like Amber, or, have been in the foster care system. Like, I thought people were not going to be able to relate to, Justin's mom going to prison. And actually, it turns out this is my most relatable book. I think we all have difficult family in our lives, and we all have somebody toxic in our lives that we sort of don't know what to do with or how to handle. And this is a tough book to write because I also have that kind of person in my life. So it was, I drew from a lot of my own personal experiences writing this book. It wasn't the same as what these 2 characters went through, but I do have that person in my life. So it was a tough book to write in general, not necessarily from either POV, just like in general.
Because I was going to ask you, my next question was actually going to be, which I always ask every author, what was there a scene or a chapter or a character that was more challenging to write than the others? And it sounds like maybe the 2 moms in a way, or no.
Yeah, I think, gosh, if there was a scene that was tough to write, all the scenes with Amber were really tough to write. It's hard to my characters feel very real to me. Okay. People often ask me, when you are writing the book, are you laughing and crying in the same spots we are? Yes, I am. I am laughing and crying in the same spots. So it's very difficult to write those types of deeper scenes. Like the scene where Emma was sick on the island by herself. And, she was sort of like descending into this fever dream, and she's so alone, and she's, so lost, and she's remembering what she went through when she was 8. That was a really tough scene for me to write.
Have you ever been that sick before?
Yeah. I actually I remember being that sick one time when I was around the same age, actually, which is probably where I drew the memory from. But yeah, it's not great. But thankfully, I had people taking care of me. I wasn't alone on an island. So
that was actually one of the most vivid scenes for me. I loved him getting to her and everything. It was fantastic. So what gave you the idea for this book, and especially like the curse? Where did that come from?
Well, I have this really good friend. She's one of my group admins for my Facebook group, and she's also one of my beta readers. And we go on plot walks where we'll, take these long walks, and we'll talk about whatever I'm struggling with whatever book I'm working on. And I said, I just can't figure out like what is going to be like the meet cute or the challenge in this book. And she starts telling me that she's like the female version of Good Luck Chuck. That every guy that she meets, she's like a temporary foster home for men that then they go on to find their forever families after. And I thought, that's actually hilarious. I could use that. What if they both had the same curse? And in theory, if they date each other and break up, they both go on to find the love of their lives after. So that's where I got the idea for that. There's real people out there that have that.
Oh, well, I did not know that, but so that's great. Well, I was just going to ask you, do you believe you must be a romantic at heart? writing 6 romance novels. I mean, do you believe that there's somebody out there for everybody and that you can walk in a room and see somebody and it's love at first sight?
Actually, I'm incredibly practical and not a very romantic person. Like when my husband and I got engaged, we were literally just sitting in our living room and I was like, my dad said if we got engaged, if we got married, he'd pay for the wedding. And my husband was like, oh, okay. Do you want to get married then? I was like, sure. Like that, that's our love story. I'm like an acts of service person. Like I love acts of service. So I write a lot of that into my male characters. Actually, there's a lot of my husband and probably in every single one of my books. I've got a really fantastic golden retriever, if you wanted to, he would kind of husband.
Right.
That if you've ever come to see me on book tour, you've probably met him because he's with me at every single stop and meets every single one of my readers. But I'm not a very romantic person, honestly, which is kind of funny, but I love, love, love romance.
Yeah.
I love it in movies. I love it in books. It's always the thing I've gravitated to since the earliest age. I was reading romance novels when I was in high school, those, bodice rippers with Fabio on the cover. I've always been a huge fan of romance. So it's natural for me that I write it. And I would never write any other genre, honestly.
What's your favorite rom-com movie?
Oh
Mine's
my
Falling Hill.
I just saw The Fall Guy last night with
Emily
Ryan. Yes. Oh my God. Right. And Ryan Gosling. So good. Like so good. I was sitting there and I'm like, this is a well done rom-com. This is how you do it. It was just so witty and smart and fun and
Yeah.
like the chemistry between those two characters was really good. So that's my recommendation for this month.
Yeah, I can't wait. I haven't seen that one, but it's on my list. Just it's now streaming, so I can't wait to see it. So does your husband read each of your books and say like, hey, Justin would not say this, or does he ever give you any advice? Does he read through it
Husband, actually, nobody in my household reads my books, ironically enough. I do read chapters to my husband as I go, just to like bounce ideas off of him. And then when I get my audiobooks, and I'm screening the audiobook for errors and things like that, I usually play it out loud in my kitchen. So it's like my family reads my books, but it's sort of by osmosis, like they're just sort of like by being in the same space as me. Sometimes actually what part of my process as a writer is every single time my book is like my first draft is done, I read it out loud to my sister-in-law over the phone. Because reading it out loud helps me hear errors and echoes and stilted dialogue. So I'll read it out loud and then they'll hear me reading it out loud. And, so my whole family knows what my books are about and they, have heard bits and pieces of it, but nobody really reads the whole thing because they're just not readers.
right.
Yeah, my husband knows exactly what the book is about. And he knows enough to know, he could reasonably say he's read it, but he didn't read it in like the traditional way.
Right. I just wonder if he gave you feedback like on the male characters or something.
He does sometimes, yeah. He gives me ideas sometimes, like funny things that him and his friends do or, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it used to be a lot harder for me to write male characters, obviously, because I'm not a man. But now it's not hard for me anymore. I don't know if I've just exercised it enough that I know how to do it, or if I'm just writing emotionally intelligent people.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter the gender.
Yeah, I know that you are known for your dialogue and being so good at writing dialogue.
Yeah.
So I heard that you write a book a year. I don't know if that's correct or not, but I read that somewhere. Is that true? You write one book a year, and do you wake up? Do you try to write 6 hours a day or 4 hours a day, or what's your writing process like?
I do write one book a year. That was part of the stipulation when I signed my book deal. I said I don't want to put out more than I can do well. I think, for me, I also have a bakery. So I own a business called Nadia Cakes. I'm a Cupcake Wars winner. And I started because I loved making cakes. And I did that so much that I actually lost my love for it. I lost my passion for it. And to this day, if I never decorate another cake for the rest of my life, I'd be fine. And I was very cognizant that I didn't want that to happen with the books. So I told them I will put out one a year and I really take my time with it. So my process is that I think about the story first. I don't write any notes. I don't write any chapter outlines. I don't write a synopsis. I think for months. And then once I have a really good idea of what book I want to write and what I want to do, I'll pitch it to my editor. We'll have, a conversation about it. If she gives me the approval for the idea, then I will write a synopsis, but only for her because she needs to see exactly what I'm going to do. Because if I don't, then she hates something and I have to change it.
Yeah.
And then once she's approved all of that, I throw the synopsis away. I never look at it again, and I write the book from memory. I write on my cell phone a lot, my first draft. Yeah, because it just gives me the freedom to write wherever I am. I can, it's very organic. And really the only rule that I have is I don't write before 12 o'clock noon, just because my brain is not awake enough for me to be like writing witty banter. I always marvel at these people that are like, yeah, I get up at 5 a.m. and I go to my local coffee shop, and it's, everybody's got their own process, but I can't do the distraction. I can't listen to music. I can't be in a place where there's other humans and it's bustling. And I can't do it before 12 o'clock noon, or I'm just going to give you garbage and I'm going to have to rewrite it and fix things later.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, a lot of writers do say they start early, like at 5 or 6, then stop in the afternoon because they're brain dead by that time. So,
Yeah, I work the other way. I'm brain dead in the morning, and then I'm good until like 8 or 9 o'clock at night.
right. So there's a line in the book where it says, "In a world where you can choose anger or empathy, always choose empathy." How did that line come to you? And it seems like people really related to that line.
Um, you know, I go to therapy too. And I remember a therapist telling me one time something along those lines, like empathy is always healthier. You could choose to be upset about something, or you could choose to be empathetic. And that really resonated with me. And now I love that it's resonating with so many other people, because it's so true. Anger is not going to do anything for you. Empathy is going to help you understand. And even though that understanding might still not be something that is acceptable, it's so much healthier than just being upset about it.
So fans have written you about that line.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's one of the most highlighted lines in the book for sure.
So I know that I think you live in Minnesota, correct?
Yes.
So after reading this book, just for the summer, it's almost a love letter to Minnesota in a way. I would think a lot of people would want to go visit after reading this book. I mean, what's great about living I've never been to Minnesota, believe it or not. So why did you want to set it in Minnesota, and what's so great about Minnesota?
Well, I actually chose Minnesota. So I'm a California girl. And around 12 years ago, we decided that we wanted to open up another bakery, but we didn't want to do it in California. So we took this big cross country trip. We went through 23 states and
Wow.
came to Minnesota and just fell in love. So we moved here, and we moved here with no friends, no family, nothing, just literally a love for the state, how beautiful it was. All of the things that it offers. It's got so many parks and just the wildlife. Like actually right now, as I'm sitting here talking to you, I have a wetland outside my window, and
Wow.
there's deer out there. It's just gorgeous. And I picked this state. And when I first started writing, my editor told me, you should really set your books in New York or California, because globally everybody knows what New York and California looks like. It's more relatable, right? And I just didn't do that. Just started writing in Minnesota pretty much immediately, because it's what I see. It's easier for me to world build when I don't have to make things up or research or go somewhere. It's what I see. And Minnesota's gorgeous. It's absolutely stunning.
Wow.
I actually have people that do like the Abby Jimenez pilgrimage now, where they come to Minnesota and they go to Nadia Cakes,
Yeah.
and they eat some of the places that are mentioned in the book, or books. And, they go to the restaurants that I mention, and then they go to Majors and Quinn and they get signed copies of the book.
Wow. So Nadia Cakes, I did want to ask you about that. I know you also are a Food Network champion, and that you founded Nadia Cakes, I think in 2000, is it 2007?
Mm-hmm.
Out of your kitchen. So I just wondered, have you always loved to bake? Is writing and baking your two things, your two passions?
Yes. So, these are both introvert hobbies. I'm very, very introverted. I always loved cakes, loved baking from a really early age. And, when I was pregnant with my third baby in 3 years, I ended up losing my job, and I was beside myself. I loved my job, and I decided to take some cake decorating classes at the local Michael's, just to have something to do to get my mind off it. And I ended up using those Wilton cake decorating classes to start my own cake business out of my house. Did that from home for 2 years, and then opened up my first inline bakery in 2009. I've got 3 locations now. I have one in Palmdale, California. We still have our original location and our very first employee that we ever hired, and one in Minneapolis and one in St. Paul. And we do ship nationwide. And we actually, for every book, this is kind of a fun tidbit, but for every book that I do, we make a special cupcake inspired by the book.
Really?
And yes. And so we have a cupcake called the Forehead Kiss. And it's got a sherbet frosting that matches the cover of the book. And it's a pineapple orange coconut cake. And it comes in gluten free, and we carry it all summer. And we actually ship it nationwide as well. So you can go and get this cupcake that's inspired by the book and get it anywhere if you're in the US, which is pretty cool.
So you can just Google Nadia's Cakes and find this, I gather, right?
On Goldbelly, yep, we ship on Goldbelly. It is very pricey, as Goldbelly is, but it's because everything has to be overnighted. It's a heavy shipment with lots of, ice packs, and it has to be overnighted. So it is kind of expensive, but it's a very nice treat.
Yeah.
Especially
Great. I have to try that. I've got to look that up too. I asked the members of the book club what they wanted me to ask you. And one woman who has read all of your books, all 6 of them, said, you've written a lot of fun rom-com tropes. What is your favorite one?
Well, I could tell you that my favorite romance trope is friends to lovers. And I think I'm going to continue to write in the friends to lovers trope as I go on. I just love the organic way that friends to lovers unfolds.
Right.
Now, my favorite trope to read is probably enemies to lovers, which I could never really pull off just because of the kind of heroes that I like to write. I'm writing these very soft, soft golden retriever cinnamon roll heroes, and I can't make them unlikable enough to believe that the heroine would actually hate him.
Right.
For an enemies to lovers to really to pull it off the way I would want to. But yeah, friends to lovers, I'd have to say is my favorite to write.
Oh, that's great. So how did your career as a writer get started? Were you always a writer when you were a kid, or
Oh no.
college? No.
Well, my career as a writer started as a reader. So like I said, was always an avid reader. I used to blow through the Piers Anthony books when I was, God, probably too young to be reading Piers Anthony books. Read romance all throughout high school, always an avid reader. And I sort of lost my joy in reading just because I got busy. I had kids. I was working when I got the bakeries open. I was working so much, and I had 3 small children. And once I got my 3rd bakery up and running, and my kids were now in grade school, and I finally had time to sit back and kind of get back into my hobby. So I started reading again, and I immediately started picking up romances again. And after reading a couple of romances, I was like, gosh, I bet I could write a romance. And so I had this idea to just write my own book. And I ended up writing this very terrible YA dystopian romance that no one will ever see the light of. It will never see the light of day ever. And I submitted this to a literary agent, and she told me that I would probably benefit from getting some critique partners. So I ended up on a site called Critique Circle, and Critique Circle ended up being a 12-month writing boot camp for me. I never went to college. I did take creative writing in high school, but I never had any formal training in writing. Wow. And I spent literally 8 to 12 hours a day on Critique Circle, writing what would end up being the Happy Ever After playlist. That was the first book that, besides the terrible dystopian YA, that was my first book that I wrote that was actually good, and ended up getting an agent off of that book. So, I didn't have any writing chops. There was nothing to recommend me as an author. I just threw myself into the practice, and it was a hobby. It was a hobby, just like the cupcakes, that I turned into a business.
So I don't know if this has been optioned for a film or TV series. I didn't see that anywhere. I'm just wondering if it has, because I can see this being a really great series.
There's always movie interest for my books. I will tell you that. I will also tell you that this stuff typically takes a really, really long time to hit the screen. I was just watching Firefly Lane, and I realized, oh, that's a Kristen Hanna book. Yeah. And then I looked, I was like, oh, it's a Kristen Hanna book she wrote in 2008. So it does take a really long time. I don't have any announcements for you at this time, but I can tell you there is interest. There has always been interest. All my books get interest all the time.
So what are you doing next? What are you writing next? Can you tell us anything about the next book?
Sure. So my next book, I've already written it. It's already been turned in. It's called Say You'll Remember Me. It's still in the Abbeyverse, but we have a whole new group of friends. And it's about a woman who meets a cranky veterinarian, and they go on an amazing, epic, unforgettable first date the day before she's moving to California to take care of her mother with early onset dementia. Oh, and, she's like, it can never work. We're going to be 2,000 miles apart, but they can't remember to forget each other.
Oh, that's great. So you said you write a little bit of the male characters might all have a little bit of your husband in them. So are you kind of part of all of your main female characters? Is there a little bit of you in all of them, like Emma?
There's a little bit of me in all of the characters, male and female. Obviously I pull a lot from my real life, my real experiences, my real takes on a lot of things. In a lot of ways, they're not like me. I have to write people that have different worldviews than I have. For my books to not feel repetitive,
Right.
for them to for each one to feel like these people are individuals as they should. Um, but in Say You'll Remember Me, this is a book that leans heavily on memory because of the topic in the book. And I drew on a lot of my own personal memories growing up in Southern California to write this book. So that's going to be a fun one for everybody to read.
So when does this come out?
Comes out same time next year, so April of next year. And this book is going to be coming out in hardcover.
Fantastic. Okay. Just maybe two more questions here. I wanted to know like what authors inspire you? Do you have a favorite book that you've read in the last 6 months? I'm just curious what you like and who you like.
Well, my Roman Empire books are People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry and Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. Those are like, if I had to be on a desert island with two romance novels, those are the ones I'm taking with me. And then I read a lot of historic nonfiction. I actually have like a varied interest in books. So I've read in the last month Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. I read that, narrated by Meryl Streep, which is really great. And then right now I'm actually reading the story of the Vanderbilts. The rise and decline of their fortune, and it's narrated by Anderson Cooper, which is really interesting. I do a lot of audiobooks, but I bounce around a lot, and I do read a lot of romance because I blurb a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tom Lake was a previous Girlfriend Book Club pick, and Ann Patchett joined us, and
That's fun.
I love that book. So one more question I always ask. The Girlfriend is all about female friendship and the importance of female friendship, especially as we grow older. So I just want to know, like, what do you do with your girlfriends for fun? What's your favorite thing to do when you're not baking and writing and taking care of your kids?
Oh gosh, I've got a really very close group of friends. They all admin my reader group on Facebook, which if you're not a part of, you should join because there's so many perks in there. And I actually just flew them all out to Florida to do the Baby Goats event at Steamy Lit Con, or Steamy Lit, the new bookstore. So I just did that. That was really fun. We got a Verbo, and we played with baby goats and baby donkeys and went to a bookstore and did a book signing. It was really awesome.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Abby. Is there anything else that you hope people will take away from this, or anything else you'd like to say to your fans?
Yes. So if you're new to my books, I recommend going back and reading Part of Your World and Yours Truly, because all of my books are connected. All 6 of them are connected in the Abbyverse, as my readers like to call it. And you'll get a lot of cameos and a lot of backstory for some of the people that you met in Just for the Summer. So if you're new to me and you loved what you read, go back and grab Part of Your World and Yours Truly. And then if you love those, go back and start at the beginning and read The Friend Zone, The Happy Ever After playlist, and Life's Too Short.
Fantastic. That's really good to know. Thank you. So thank you so much, Abby. Everybody that's watching tonight, please stay on the Girlfriend Book Club page, because I'll be posting several conversation starters so that you guys can talk about what you loved about the book yourselves. So thank you, Abby. Good luck. And we can't wait for your new book to come out next April. And tell us the name again. I've just forgot that.
It's called Say You'll Remember Me.
Say You'll Remember Me. All right. Thank you so much, Abby. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.